This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by TeamPay. Wouldn't it be great if you had a way to automatically enforce spend policies and gain full transparency into requests for funds, all the way to reconciliation? And what if you could do that while empowering your employees to buy what they need when they need it? TeamPay gives total control and real-time visibility into spending. TeamPay's distributed spend management platform automates the purchasing workflow and gives you proactive controls and real-time visibility over company spend. And TeamPay also empowers your employees with a user-friendly purchasing experience. When employees make a request, TeamPay automatically enforces policies, issues intelligent payments, and automatically sends the transaction data to your accounting system pre-coded. To learn more about how TeamPay modernizes how you manage spending, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/TeamPay. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/TEAMPAY.
Your accounting system, whichever one you use, if it finds itself containing patient names or addresses of patients, will have to comply with the privacy and security rules of HIPAA.
Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I'm Blake Oliver.
I'm David Leary.
And I'm Mariana Antcheva, VP Legal of Sage Intacct.
Mariana, thanks for joining us. We are here at Sage Intacct Advantage.
Live in Las Vegas.
Live recording right in the middle of this major walkway.
It's a rotunda. People are going from sessions to other sessions, and there's elevators going upstairs. I mean, this is a big conference. There's like thousands of people here.
I like to always look at all the sessions, and I plow through them, and I'm like, why? And I saw yours, and I'm like, why is a lawyer speaking to a bunch of accountants and bookkeepers? And so you usually don't see that at the conferences we tend to attend. So how did you become a speaker at an accounting conference? Yeah, Intacct Advantage.
Well, this is my second Advantage for Sage Intacct. Last year, I volunteered to speak because the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, a privacy regulation, quite comprehensive, that came into effect last year in Europe, was something at the forefront of the news, as well as we were getting questions at Sage Intacct about our own compliance. So I volunteered to do a session for Advantage, and I ended up, quite surprisingly to myself even, being the highest rated speaker at last year's Advantage. So this year, the Sage Intacct Advantage team invited me to do 2 sessions.
To defend your title.
Yes.
And of course, in the world of professional services, if you do well, you just get more work, right?
That's very true.
That's the real world.
So this year, you're speaking on, what are the 2 topics you're doing this year?
I am doing today, which is Wednesday, October 23rd, I'm doing the California Consumer Privacy Act, a new California law that's going to come in effect on January 1st, 2020. Mm-hmm. In California, and it's quite comprehensive, privacy-oriented. And tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about HIPAA.
And that is the health information. Help me with that acronym.
Let me help you here. HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is a federal law dealing with the provision of medical care, as well as the handling of individual medical information called protected health information.
So I have a personal story around HIPAA compliance, which is that I started my career as a bookkeeper, and some of my earliest clients were in the medical field, occupational therapists, doctors, right, offices. And I'm a bookkeeper. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA at that point. And to me, it was like no big deal that we had patient names in the accounting system, right? And we were tracking their sessions or, in different ways and whatnot. But I understand that is not okay to do in certain respects, right? Like we have to keep, like the big picture around HIPAA, we have to keep the patients anonymized somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Like what do we have to avoid doing?
Okay, so as a lawyer, in a typical lawyerly fashion, let me ask you a question before I answer your question. When was that?
So I guess that was like 5 years ago.
Okay, so you're asking actually somewhat of a history question. Yes, because HIPAA has evolved over time, especially around the issues that you're alluding to, meaning how protected health information is handled, how secure it has to be, how private it has to be. HIPAA was originally passed in 1996. And at that time, it was passed as kind of a framework that it was supposed to be filled in over time. Mm-hmm. The original focus was more on the portability part, portability of health insurance when employees change jobs, portability of medical records when patients change medical providers. But over time, this framework got filled with also the privacy and security aspects. In 2004, the privacy rule came into effect, and it deals at a very high level with how private the medical information has to be, with whom it can be shared, etc., etc. And then 2 years later, 2006, the security rule came into effect, and it deals with how secure the protected health information has to be, protected from unauthorized disclosure or alteration. Oh. And then 2009, another couple of big developments. The breach notification rule came into effect, and that deals with who do you have to tell if you realize that protected health information in your custody has been disclosed without authorization. That is the breach. And the other development in 2009 was the HITACC Act. And here I have to refer to my notes because HITACC stands for Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act. And
simple.
Yeah, very simple. But the HITACC Act deals with electronic health records, also expands the HIPAA privacy and security rules to business associates. And I assume you were actually a business associate?
Right. So that gets us to the question is like, why should we as accountants care about HIPAA, right? If it's medical information, right? Like
we're just touching the money.
Yeah, we're just accounting for the business, right? Why do we care?
Okay. Another legal trick here.
Yes.
Legal trick.
Before I answer this question, I would like to include a preface here.
Okay.
Because HIPAA does not apply to every single company here in the United States. It applies to what HIPAA calls covered entities. And covered entities is at a very high level are kind of three kinds. They're providers of health services. They're also could be health plans, or healthcare clearinghouses. So if you're an accountant providing accounting services for one of these covered entities, definitely HIPAA has to be at the forefront of what you do.
Because you're a business associate
exactly.
of these covered entities.
And what a lot of, sometimes it gets missed, a lot of people don't realize that a patient name in and of itself, or a patient name and an address themselves without further medical information actually constitute protected health information under HIPAA.
And this is what I had no idea about as a bookkeeper is that, I don't know what the reasoning was, but I think whoever set it up thought, okay, well, we're not including any medical information in this file. It's just names and addresses for invoices.
This is a very common misconception.
Right. But so that is, I can't even have that in the accounting system unless the system is compliant, right, with those data protections. Is that what I'm...
Exactly right. Your accounting system, whichever one you use,
right.
If it finds itself containing patient names or addresses of patients, will have to comply with the privacy and security rules of HIPAA.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by Bill.com. As a listener, you've probably heard Blake and I speak about Bill.com on numerous occasions. It feels like they're discussed monthly in either new news or new announcements. But I'm betting there are some things you don't know about Bill.com. Did you know customers use Bill.com platform to process over $70 billion in payments for the 2019 fiscal year? That they partner with several of the largest U.S. financial institutions like Bank of America, PNC, and Chase? More than 70 of the top 100 U.S. accounting firms use Bill.com. Bill.com not only connects to all the popular accounting software providers, they also connect to many of your favorite apps as well. To learn more about how Bill.com's AI-enabled financial software platform creates connections between businesses and helps manage cash inflows and outflows, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/Bill. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/BILL.
Got it. And that, it excludes the vast majority of accounting software available on the small business market, right? Because I've looked into this, like nothing that's selling, direct to like the products that you would get at Office Depot are not HIPAA compliant, right? Generally. So
then I see this ripple effect because obviously we're Sage Intacct Advantage today, and there's all those apps in the expo floor, and they tie onto Sage Intacct, but they also tie into all the other accounting systems that are out there. So now there's like a ripple effect because maybe the accounting system's HIPAA compliant, but maybe that timesheet app isn't. Where does this stop?
That's an excellent question because you assume that HIPAA follows wherever the protected health information goes. And that's exactly right. That's the concept of a business associate, someone who is not the covered entity, but performs services or holds information for the covered entity. And if Sage Intacct, for example, our application were to hold protected health information for our customers, applications that link to it, that's your question, do they have to be compliant with HIPAA as well or not? Yeah. And the answer, here comes another lawyerly answer. It depends. It depends first on whether protected health information makes it into the other application, because in many cases it actually doesn't. If it is an application that does, for example, employee expense reimbursement, there's no protected health information, there's no patient data in that application, so it won't have to comply with HIPAA. Yeah. But assuming that protected health information makes it into the other application, then it also depends, because some purposes for handling protected health information are actually outside of the scope of HIPAA, and HIPAA lists what these are. And examples of that are some forms of scientific research, for example, would not fall under HIPAA. Or what is perhaps more pertinent to our listeners today is processing for financial purposes, such as processes of consumer-conducted transactions by debit, credit, or other payment card, or the clearing of checks, or electronic fund transfers. Things like that are outside of the scope of HIPAA.
Okay.
So it is a very complicated set of rules, almost like playing chess.
Like collections, I imagine, too, because the way collections works a lot of times is that patient didn't pay you. Now you turn that over to a collections agency, and sometimes they sell it to 50 other collection agencies. I mean, technically that's the patient, but it sounds like that, based on what you just said, all of a sudden it's not covered.
We will have to delve into the depths of the of the HIPAA regulations to verify where collections stand on one side or the other. And if you have listeners who are interested in that, I urge them to consult with their legal advisors because, again, the rules are so complicated.
So how does Sage Intacct help with HIPAA compliance?
Well, Sage Intacct announced its HIPAA compliance last year. And it was a kind of an involved process for us.
Almost a decade after.
Right.
After the high-tech standards were put in, it took a decade for Intacct to even announce.
We have had interest by prospective customers asking whether we are HIPAA compliant. So first we conducted a customer survey to understand what the actual need is. And we realized that the typical use case scenario for Sage Intacct is when the accounting team needs to process and issue a refund check to the patient. That's when the patient's name and address make it into Sage Intacct. So we said, okay, there's need by our customers and prospective customers for us to be HIPAA compliant so that we can address this use case without resorting to some workarounds. So we engaged with a vendor, a sword and shield, and conducted gap analysis. And we realized that we were already in kind of pretty good shape because we're PCI compliant, we're SSA 18 compliant. So the gap analysis resulted in a kind of high 19% compliance already. The most probably involved gap that we had was our ability to track not only who has edited accounting information in the system, but also who has accessed it. One of the rights of the patient under HIPAA is to receive information from the covered entity who has accessed that patient's health information. And in an application such as ours, this turned out to be a pretty significant technical issue. Imagine, for example, you run a report and the patient information makes it into the report, or you have a drop-down menu which is pre-populated for convenience purposes. That's also considered access. So we took a very detailed approach We did significant product development. In our May release in 2018, we launched the Advanced Audit Trail, which does this advanced tracking of access. Oh. And an interesting fact for our listeners, I myself last year had to have surgery at a renowned Silicon Valley hospital, and I was given the option to create an account on the website of the hospital for myself to communicate with my doctors, to track my prescriptions, things like that. So per using the website in my account, I saw a button, who has seen my information? I'm like, oh, HIPAA, access rule, let me see who has seen my information. So I clicked, and I was so underwhelmed to realize that the system returned only my own logins.
Right, of course.
I'm like, oh, amateurs.
So when it comes to HIPAA compliance, so like obviously if someone wants to be a CPA, right? If you have to take a bar, like to go through the bar exam to become a lawyer, do you just like test it yourself and be like, hey, we're HIPAA compliant? Or is there some certification board that's out there issuing stamps, medallions for being HIPAA compliant?
So there is no official certification for HIPAA compliance, but there are vendors who would provide an independent assessment of your systems and processes and would issue a verification whether, in their opinion, you're compliant. So Sage Intacct uses Sword and Shield as such a vendor, and
so where you can push that liability. Like,
yeah.
we hired these guys; they said we were. You can push that liability off of you a little.
I don't really view it as a reassignment of liability, but it is something to reassure our customers that we're taking it seriously, that we're continually monitoring and staying on top of it every year.
Let's do a hypothetical. I am a CPA who owns a small accounting firm, and I have lots of medical offices that I do outsourced accounting for. And we have exactly that situation that you mentioned, where that use case where we're very careful not to include any patient information in the general ledger. The doctors have their own practice management software. We're just recording the income and expenses. Except every now and then, the doctor has to issue a refund check. And we will cut that check, and now there's a patient name in the general ledger. Mm-hmm. And we're not using a HIPAA-compliant accounting system. We're using something else. What is my risk? What is the risk I'm running, right, if I just keep doing that? Like, what are the potential penalties that I might face? Because it's very expensive for me to change accounting systems. Maybe I'll just keep doing it if it's not that big a deal.
Well, from the mouth of a lawyer, it's never a good idea to ignore the law, but that is especially true about HIPAA. HIPAA carries significant civil and criminal penalties, and HIPAA takes actually into account the culpability of the company and how reckless or willful they were in violating the HIPAA rules. Mm-hmm. So in really bad cases, the civil penalties can go quite high, up to $1.5 million per year per type of violation. But on top of that, there could be criminal penalties for willful violations going up to 10 years imprisonment. So HIPAA is no joke.
I'm trying to think about a poor accountant or bookkeeper now, right? So you have to know IRS regulations and guidelines, right? You now, because Wayfair versus South Dakota, you need to basically understand sales tax nexus at a completely ridiculous 50 state, county, city level across the board. Now you have to also know HIPAA laws because your clients might the poor accountant or bookkeeper has to know everything now these days.
And may I add the California Consumer Privacy Act?
Oh yeah, the Privacy Act now. That's next. Privacy Act, yep, absolutely.
Or the privacy laws of about a dozen states that are still in the works but may come into effect in the next year or so.
Fortunately, what the California Act only applies to businesses of a certain size, right? And the threshold is, do you have those offhand? I don't remember. It's
That is my presentation in about 38 minutes.
All right, we'll have to start a whole
Let
new
me
podcast
give you the
for
number.
That.
It is over 25 million in revenue, or a business that derives more than 50% of their revenue from selling personal data, or a business that sells the personal data of more than 25,000 people per year.
Yeah, and to me, not to get into this, this is really a topic for another episode, But to me, the big logistical hurdle would seem to be figuring out how to get all of that customer data into one place, because you have to be able to return it to the customer if they ask for it, right?
Yes.
And so if you have like everything in spreadsheets all over the place, it's impossible.
Very true.
Or
Very true.
Very difficult, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, I hear that buzz, and I think that means people are changing sessions, and you probably have to get over to your session that you're going to be leading. So,
especially with the reputation of being the best session person from last year.
Well, let me first try to defend it this year, and then we will talk again.
So, Mariana, we always ask our guests, where can people contact you, get in touch with you online if they'd like to continue the conversation?
Of course. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mariana Antcheva, VP Legal of Sage. I check LinkedIn pretty regularly. Shoot me a message if you would like to connect.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.